Hi, I'm Darren and welcome to Level Up Double E Lab. I've made really good progress on getting my IP-20 power supply back together, but does it work? Let's find out. All right, here's the 3 printed circuit boards. I finished populating all of them. Let's have a look at them, starting with this guy, the rectifier board. It has the least total number of components of the 3, but it's also got the largest components. Dominated by the 3 2200 micron volt caps here. Then, of course, there's 4 of these 6A10 rectifier diodes, 2 1 ohm resistors in parallel. They act as a little bit of inrush limiters for the charging of the caps, and then a little bleeder resistor, and a whole lot of copper on this side. Not much to it. And I've got this one and the next one, the 5 volt board, already set up with some temporary leads for testing. So let's look at the 5 volt board next. Of course, it's the smallest of the 3, but it's also got a rectifier section right here. Then in the middle, we've got the 78M05 voltage regulator, and then the tiny little guy right here, the LM7705 negative voltage reference IC. Now, I mentioned in the prior episode that the toner transfer method struggles with making the pads for something that's small, and soldering it is just as tricky. And I came up with a technique here that works pretty well because I got a new toy a few weeks ago, a digital microscope, and that helps a lot. It's just a basic, I think $30 or $40 digital microscope, nothing to it, but it makes all the difference in the world to be able to magnify this area just enough to be able to solder it by hand reasonably well. So here's my technique. First, I take the board and I tape it down to the base so it can't slide around, and have the pad, of course, centered in the screen. Then flood the area with some liquid solder flux. Position the chip with tweezers using a fine tip soldering iron next with a tiny bit of solder just to tack one corner, one outer leg, and keep the chip from moving around. Then tack solder a leg on the other side, and then kind of go back and forth with soldering the remaining leads, sometimes in groups. And I'm not worried at all about solder bridges. I'm going to get some because of that very fine pitch of those leads. But then after I'm done, I'll follow up with some fine solder braid and drag it parallel and away from the chip. And that leaves just enough solder behind to maintain a good joint. And then the last step is to follow up with a quick wipe with the iron tip that had no solder loaded onto it, just to kind of smooth out the joints and run that parallel to the leads. And of course, use a gentle technique through this whole thing. It does take a bit of practice and trials, but in the end, I got decent solder joints on something even as small as a VSOP 8 with no solder mask. And then the third board, which is the main board, as I've been calling it, is a mix of surface mount on this side and through-hole components on the other side. Now, some of these have to be through-hole, like the TIP 54 transistors, the relay, a couple power resistors, but I've also got several quarter-watt resistors here that didn't need to be, but from an ease of routing standpoint, it made sense to put these in so that I could, like right here, run a trace on this side between the leads of the resistor. Very common old school technique done on circuit boards to minimize the complexity of routing. And even so, I've got a few jumper wires in here to connect points on the circuit, but ultimately I still have a one-sided board. I didn't need a second layer of copper there, so that worked out fine. Basic technique, of course, place all the SMT components first, then work on the through hole on the other side, starting with the shortest guys, which of course would be the jumper wires, then work your way up in height until you get to the tallest ones. Looking at the OPA 2310, that's the dual op amp that's in the circuit. That is an SOIC 8 package, which seems kind of huge compared to that VSOP on the low voltage board. Now these I can easily solder one lead at a time. It doesn't make messy solder bridges, and I don't need to follow up with solder braid. It's actually kind of a breeze to solder these guys in place. And then a couple other things. I make some test points here out of some loops of scrap hookup wire, just to have a convenient spot to put on a clip lead when I've got several meters at once, which I will have here shortly when I'm testing this out. Putting on the 3 guys that are on the heatsink. Now, The right way to do these is to get these soldered at the correct height. If you just solder them willy-nilly, they're not going to line up with the holes in the heatsink, and this board is secured by that structure that I showed in the prior episode, the 3D printed frames on each end. So what makes logical sense here is I put these in place without solder, assembled everything in the correct position, including putting the mounting hardware in these guys so that they were at the correct height, and then tack solder one leg on each device, then disassemble everything, flip the board over, and then do the final soldering. That way I got everything lined up right where it needs to be. It's a little more work, but that is the right way to do it. And as a final step, I cleaned all these with a little bit of lacquer thinner to get the remaining solder flux off, and I'm ready now to test them out. First up to test is the rectifier board, and it's a very simple test. I'm going to have a certain amount of AC coming in, and I want to make sure I'm getting the predicted amount of DC output. And a good tool to use to check it out is, of course, the dim bulb tester, because I can adjust the amount of AC that I'm input into the board, and I can watch on the bulb to make sure there wasn't any shorts or other problems. Now, I do have the meter on the dim bulb tester, but it's not terribly accurate, so I'm going to double check the AC output using my DMM, which I've done before I started recording here, and I'm targeting around 47 volts to see if I get around 60 to 62 volts DC output. That's one of my calculations that I did earlier in this series. So I've got the meter set on AC, so let's see where I am.
This item contains hazardous voltage and safety precautions must be followed. If you're following along and working on your own version, you're doing so at your own risk.
And it's going to bounce around a little bit because it's connected up to line voltage. Get it on contact here. So about 47 to 48, that's where I want it to be. So let's set this on DC now and see what I have for output. Just under 60 volts. So that's good. So this guy's working fine. And here is the 5 volt and negative voltage reference board hooked up, and it's a little more complicated than the rectifier board. Couple things. I did put a temporary load on the output here, a 47 ohm resistor, so I get around 100 milliamps or so. When the relay is energized in the power supply, it's going to draw around 80, and the rest of the circuit in there is not more than a few milliamps on top of that, but I wanted to put some load on that regulator to make sure that everything was working okay. I've also got the fan connected. You can see it in the background, and that's connected right to the output of the rectifier before it goes into the voltage regulator. But again, I also want to load everything, and then I'm going to check the voltage on the fan to make sure I'm getting around that, I think it was about 9 volts or so, 9.5 volts that I really wanted to get to be able to drive the fan. I've also got the dim bulb tester off screen. I've got it set and dialed in to try to get about 8.5 volts AC, which is what I expect from the power transformer. So here we go. Let me hook it up. It's going to be a little noisy, and I'm going to try to make these measurements and not block the meter. It's very difficult to do these. If you guys never tried to do this before, to stay out of your own view. And I see I got a little glare on the meter. So let me try it now. I'm on AC. Let's see. It's about 8.8, 8.9. That's in the ballpark of what I want. Now let me put this on DC, and again, get the meter so there's no glare on it. Let's see what the voltage is going to that fan. So I'll probe it here and here. 9.5 volts AC, DC, 9.5 volts DC. That's good. Let's look at the output from my regulator. Again, trying not to block the meter. 4.999, 5 volts, that's spot on. And then the negative voltage reference should be about negative 0.23 volts, and it's up here in the corner. 237 millivolts, that's good. So this board is checking out just fine. Now, as much as I would like to test the main board out on the bench like I just did for these two other boards, it's really not practical to do so. There's too many connections here, and I'd end up doing just as much work to set it up on the bench as I would to install it in the rig and connect it up. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to install it, hook up the other two boards, and then test it out in the entire assembly. I'm at a point with the reassembly where I've got the power transformer installed and a few other things just temporarily because I'm working on the secondary side of the power transformer. And if I were a little smarter, I would have labeled all of these secondary wires before I tore everything down. I didn't, so I'm going to do it the hard way now. I'm going to have to sort these out. Now, on the schematic, you've got colors like black, yellow, green, yellow, red, yellow, blue, yellow, and so on. And I'm guessing these colors were probably a lot more brilliant decades ago when this was new. Right now, it's very hard to tell them apart. So what I've done is hooked up the power supply temporarily to the dim bulb tester, and I've set the output to around 25 volts. And I'm just going to use my DMM to sort these, which I've done, to sort them from lowest voltage to highest voltage. And now that I've done that, I can get these reattached to the VR switch in the correct order. And I did initially have these sorted kind of close, but like I said, these colors were so close that I really needed to do this. And this is a much safer method to use a dim bulb tester because I could just plug it in and sort it that way, but then I run the risk of shorting these secondaries and causing the fuse to blow, or worse. In this case, if I do short the secondary, nothing bad happens. It's not going to draw anywhere near enough current to damage the power transformer. All right, I've got the secondaries from the power transformer connected in the proper order to the voltage range switch, and there are two that I'm not using, so I've just terminated them here to keep them from flopping around loosely inside the case. In worst case, might short out. So they're secured there, even though I'm not going to use them. And plus, I've obviously reassembled a lot of the other parts for the power supply. The whole front panel has almost all the components populated on it. The meter, the select switch for the meter, the two new variable resistors here, the two pots that can control the fine voltage and fine current. And most of it's wired up. There are a lot of connections, obviously, I still have to make to the main board, but I do have almost all the connections done to the rectifier board and to the low voltage board, including sending voltage out to the power on indicator. There's one little fancy thing that I've gotten done here. So I want to double check at this point that the low voltage board and the rectifier board are still working correctly. And the proper way to do that, of course, is to go back to the dim bulb tester, which I'm going to do. All right, I've got it hooked up to the dim bulb tester. The power coming in to the power transformer is, of course, going through the light bulb. So there's a little bit of a voltage drop there, but it's not enough to affect my readings. I'm getting 5 volts out of the low voltage board, which is exactly what I want. And ta-da, power indicator is on. So let me also check the low voltage side, make sure it's about 0.23 volts. And it is. And then the final check is to move the multimeter connections to the raw DC voltage and check each of the 10 outputs against my predictions. So here I'm on the 5 volt setting. I've got about 12.6 volts. And then I can run it up the scale here and check 10, I can check 15 and check 20. So I'm going to do that off camera. And if everything looks good, I'm going to proceed to finish the installation of the main board and all the other wiring and be at a point where I can see if the whole thing's going to work. Well, fast forward a few hours and I've got the main board installed and all of the electrical connections completed. I've got the LM317 and the TIP 54s bolted to the heatsink with some thermal compound and some insulators. And what I ended up using is scrounged through my parts bin, and I found these guys. I actually had a few sheets of 3/1000 thick Mylar, or not Mylar, Kapton rather, and Mylar would melt, Kapton. And so I used these and put some thermal grease on both sides, and I think that's going to work out just fine. Now I still need to install the rest of the support structure and obviously the fan and the side panels, but first I want to bring it up to make sure it is functional. And I was going to show the first time doing this live, but it just didn't power up correctly, and I decided to scrap that video because I ran into two problems, one that was pretty serious and one that was minor. And it took me a while to figure out the serious problem, and unfortunately I made a rookie mistake. I used the wrong pinout for Q1, the BSS64A. I had the emitter and the base reversed. Now, functionally, what happened was the power supply immediately went into current limit, and it was causing the OPA 2310 op amp to get really warm really quick. In fact, that's how I knew there was a problem, just putting my finger on the op amp, and I noticed, hey, that's getting warm, and op amps are not supposed to get warm. That's always a good check to do during your first bring up. The parts that are supposed to be cool, are they actually staying cool? So the fix actually was trivially pretty easy. I just had to desolder the transistor and flip it over. It's a SOT23, and the base and the emitter are just reversed. So just soldering the little guy right here upside down. It's a bodge, but quick fix and it worked. And then the second issue is I just made a silly mistake in my schematic for the variable current limit. I'll show that on screen here, because what I originally drew just won't work. R1 needs to go from RV1, the potentiometer, to ground, and then the wiper from RV1 needs to go to the op amp input through R11, the 1K resistor. So here the fix was simple. I just removed R1 from the board and connected in a leaded 390 ohm resistor from RV1 to ground. And the difference between 390 ohms and 370 ohms is very small. It won't significantly affect the performance of the power supply. And with those fixes, things seem to work. So let's turn this bad boy on. Again, still through the dim bulb tester, and ta-da! So I'm on the 5 volt setting. I got 2.46 volts, which is about halfway on the meter, and it's working. And I'll quickly jump through the other settings here. And one thing that's obvious is as you get up above, I guess it's 15 volts, and 15 volts is in the maximum range of the meter, but you get to 20 and higher. Now you're just going to use this portion of the analog meter. So I'm 20, so I'll be 15 to 20 in this range. So it's a tiny little sector, if you will, of the meter that actually gets used. So yeah, the analog meter really isn't that great for this power supply. I guess that's just the nature of the way that Heathkit designed it. You're just not using very much of the range of the meter when you get above 15 volts. But the most important thing is it's actually working. And if I park it here, let's see, that's about 47 volts, and I got 46.6 on the DMM. So that's looking pretty good. I am really excited to get to this point to finally have this power supply generate variable voltage output. It took me many months of design work and fabrication and wiring to get to this point, and I still have some other things to check out, like does the overcurrent circuit work correctly? Does the overload circuit work correctly? Plus a bunch of other simple measurements just to show how well a regulated power supply works or doesn't work. And hopefully this one works at least as well as the original Heathkit specifications. So all of that will be in the next and 10th and hopefully final episode in this series. And as always, I thank you guys for sticking with me as I've gone through something as complex as this regulated power supply. So until next time, bye for now.